One, MSNBC craters, panic within talent. Joe and Mika visit Trump. Reporters and anchors calling media reporters and asking, what is my future? Because Comcast has finally decided to sell MSNBC. We'll break it all down with Joe Concha. 2, Will's rabbit hole. I'm reading Demon Copperhead, an absolutely rock-solid recommendation for a novel. But it's led me down the rabbit hole of wondering, who are the Malingin, Redbones, Lumbees, Ramapo, the hidden tribes of America? 3, Blue Anon, the 3 biggest conspiracies of the left. A conversation with the author of a new book, David Harsanyi, on Blue Anon. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Always on demand by subscribing on Apple or Spotify, or dropping down in the text description underneath this live stream and finding the little button that suggests subscribe to the Will Cain Show on YouTube. It's been insane. It's been crazy. It's been great. It's been wonderful here on the Will Cain Show. Fellas, we are growing the Willisha exponentially. I see the smile on Tinfoil's face. Everybody's excited. This
Fantastic
is something
numbers.
else. What's happening here?
Woo.
It's happening.
We're doing it. We're doing it.
It's really awesome. Between, the audience that has found us through Patrick Bet-David, through an incredible guest yesterday, Dave Smith, just an insane week for us, 2 weeks for us around the election of Donald Trump as president of the United States. The Willisha has grown, and we are so excited that new hundreds of thousands of you are joining us here on YouTube, on Facebook, on Spotify, on Apple, on radio. It's worth it, guys. It's all worth it. I've been working on it.
There you go.
No, you don't.
Keep the elbow tucked.
Keep the elbow tucked. You just move this part.
And it's
there
very
you go.
big on
there you go.
The chest stays straight.
There you go. That's more like it.
Yeah, don't extend in a punch. That's what you're telling me. Keep the elbows
it's more just this motion.
into the ribs, and then just up
And then there's
back,
the occasional
up
flare.
and back.
This, that, or...
Yeah, that's when he's getting really frisky. then he
Yeah.
It's taking everyone by storm, the Trump dance. USA Today reporter Nancy Armour suggests in a new column that there's going to be some regret within the ranks of the NFL. She suggested that players in the NFL and across the sports spectrum and in popular culture are going to look back on this moment when they've normalized Donald Trump, when they've normalized the Trump dance with regret. Once their friends are deported and their entitlements cut, they're all going to look back on this and think, what role did I play in normalizing Donald Trump? She thinks it is, as Ben has opined on CNN, it's simply a popular trend, a fad, like a Kentucky waterfall, that one day you'll look back on your high school yearbook and regret. What I would suggest to her is she is the trend. She is the fad. And it's well out of style. What took place over the last 5 to 10 years is the exception in America. Jaguar has a new ad out where they're seemingly advertising cars, but there's not a car to be seen in the ad. It looks like the Benetton ads from the 1980s. It's androgynous, multiracial sex being sold that is simultaneously not inspirational nor sexy. But what's sad about the Jaguar ad is it's a fad tardy by 5 years. It existed in a moment of time where it suggested that cool was defined by the radical left. And I would suggest that Nancy Armour in her column suggesting athletes will one day regret the Trump dance is also a moment in time where she was at the peak of her popularity, her ideas most mainstreamed. 2018. No, I don't think this is just a popular trend. I think this is cathartic. I think it's blowing off steam. I think it's a coming out party. I think you're seeing how people really felt. I don't think Christian Pulisic is just following a TikTok dance trend. I think Christian Pulisic is now Captain America. I think the guys in the end zone at the NFL, I think John Jones are letting you know what they think about Donald Trump, what they think about America. And that lets us know exactly who now, 5 years tardy to the party, is about to go away in America. Story number one. Comcast, the parent company of NBC, NBC Universal, MSNBC, CNBC, Oxygen, Sci-Fi, has announced that they are going to spin off their cable channels from the parent company. Spin off MSNBC away from NBC. This has caused absolute panic within the halls of 30 Rock. You see, MSNBC isn't a news-gathering organization. It's not a news organization. It's simply infotainment. It's entertainment. It is opinion. They don't have their own cameras. They don't have their own reporters. Everything is built on the back of NBC, meaning leading many to wonder, well, what is the future for Joe Scarborough? What is the future for Mika Brzezinski? What's the future for Joy Reid and Rachel Maddow? Well, for their part, Joe and Mika have made their pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago. Earlier this week, they went to meet with Donald Trump, the man that for the better part of a decade they have called Hitler. They sat down with their own self-described Nazi. What's the motivation for Joe and Mika going to Mar-a-Lago? Well, many are saying they're trying to avoid personal retribution. I guess keep themselves out of the camp by kissing the ring of Hitler. More than likely, what you're looking at is two craven individuals doing anything they can to remain relevant and understanding what I described to you at the beginning of this show. Their day is come and gone. The trend is over. The fad has faded. It's no longer 2018. America has come out of the closet as red, white, and blue USA. But they also have to be wondering, what's the future for their lives at MSNBC, Joe and Mika? Like, what's the future for that network? Bill O'Reilly here, formerly of Fox News, was on News Nation saying, this is NBC, itself far left, ostracizing themselves from those who are hateful conspiratorial left, because that's what they are at MSNBC. That's not hyperbolic rhetoric. It's not even dripping in hatred. It's simply an objective, scientific, microscopic, clear-eyed analysis. No one can look at Joy Reid and think that you're getting the news. No, you're getting hate. And as such, it's embarrassing for even far left NBC. And also, it is completely now devoid of credibility. Why? Because so many people have been exposed, not just for being stupid or hateful, but for being wrong. Alan Lichtman is a longtime presidential prognosticator. He's got his 12 keys that have told you the right person that's going to win the presidency for 30 years. But Alan Lichtman was horrifically wrong when it came to Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. And now he's getting it. He's getting it shoved back into his face. I give you far left commentator Cenk Uygur and Alan Lichtman on Piers Morgan.
You don't know anything.
You attacked me personally.
You're so deluded.
Oh, right. I've only been a professor for 51 years.
On this program, I've never been able to finish a thought.
How many books have you published? No, because you're personally attacking me again. Say whatever you want, but I'm not going to stand for personal
brother, you got it wrong.
Say
you were
whatever you want.
preposterously and stupidly wrong. So, okay, all right. Can I just finish a goddamn thought ever on this show?
No, not if
Don't call me stupid.
I admitted I was wrong. I don't need you to call me stupid.
Okay.
Can I just say, it's great to see you Democrats all getting along so well.
Who taught you manners?
Don't call me stupid. I admitted I was wrong. It's panic. You can hear that. It's largely because Lichtman's a fraud. He's a fraud. He had his 12 keys, all unscientific. It's like the way that many of us analyze sports. It is sports. You know, here's the different factors that I go into saying the Jets are going to win. Wrong. You know, he's got his 12 factors that he got lucky. He got lucky several times in a row. You know, this is the scientific equivalent of you in the backyard shooting hoops going, if I make the next shot, she'll date me. Then when you miss, going best 2 out of 3. Then when you miss, going best 3 out of 5. You've all done this. We know it. It's not science. It's Alan Lichtman. And now Lichtman, instead of admitting that he's wrong in any substantial way, is blaming it on the voters. Watch Alan Lichtman.
So the idea that Trump was this great charismatic figure is absolute nonsense. And again, if you looked at his campaign, it was the worst campaign we've ever seen in the history of the country. His victory had nothing to do with Trump's charisma, nothing to do with his campaign.
He's not wrong. It's just America that got it wrong. This is you shooting hoops in the backyard. This isn't science. This is something unworthy of credibility. And that is what has been populating not just MSNBC, but CNN, but CBS, but ABC. And yes, even the parent company who now is afraid or ashamed of its redheaded step cousin, NBC. Let's break down the implosion in mainstream media with Fox News contributor, media analyst Joe Concha. What's up, Joe?
How we doing there, Will? That was a great monologue, by the way.
Good.
I'm watching it again.
Thank you so much.
Here. Well done.
Thank you so much, man.
What do you want to talk about?
We have talked, Joe, about the MSNBC and CNN ratings crater, but what we're seeing today is something incredibly new. And the announcement that Comcast wants to spin off MSNBC. Your thoughts?
I think they'll get pennies on the dollar, Will. I think it's basically a worthless product at this point. And if I got to hear one more time, and I don't know if you get this when you're just out and about talking to people, when they say, well, Fox is really just the rights version of MSNBC. Stop right there. All right. It's because on election night, we'll have people like Brett Baer, an actual journalist, an actual anchor, or Martha McCallum, or Sandra Smith, or Bill Hemmer. I could go down the line as far as the journalists that we have. And you go over to MSNBC, and who are their election night anchors? Rachel Maddow, opinion person. Joy Reid, opinion person. Nicole Wallace, opinion person. Lawrence O'Donnell, opinion person. Jen Psaki, opinion person. So that's the difference here, if you want to break that down. But overall, what we saw in 2016 was a Trump bump, right? It was actually very good for these networks that Trump was elected because, well, he's unpredictable, and a lot of people like to hate watch him, or his supporters are as loyal as we've ever seen in politics. So that was all good for all boats, and they all rose after he won in 2016. This time around, it's going in the opposite direction, and I don't think they're coming back, because the difference now is there are podcasts like yours or Joe Rogan's or all these other options. People just read X all day. They don't even go and read the New York Times anymore. So I think with all those options, I think people can be like, you know what? I was lied to. These people are crazy, by the way. Joe Scarborough, Mika Brzezinski, not only calling Trump Hitler, but saying he's going to execute U.S. generals. He's going to jail anybody who disagrees with him. That he's, what else did he terminate the Constitution? I got a whole list down here. He didn't do any of those things from 2017 to 2021. So how could you say he's going to do it now? That's why I think this is a permanent death spiral for MSNBC, CNN, where they're not even getting like 400,000 viewers on average. You know how small that is? That means you're not even getting 10,000 viewers on average per state. And that's really hard to do, Will.
I think that this show, the Will Cain Show, had 350,000 viewers yesterday. And shame on you, Joe. Shame on you for forgetting Chris Hayes. I mean, he's doing his best Rachel Maddow impersonation. He can't do any more. And you forgot that he sits on that election night special. And I just feel bad for a guy that's been in primetime for 10 years, and you forget about Chris Hayes. It's just shame on you, Joe Concha.
Forgot about Chris Hayes. They said, we want to get Jen Psaki in here. Chris, can you give up a night of your show and give it to Jen? Yeah, you're right. He does do an excellent imitation of Rachel Maddow, but nothing beats Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban. I mean, that thing was to a T. I mean, that was like Dana Carvey doing George H.W. Bush. I was very impressed by that. Well, I know you were.
It is impressive. It is impressive. Former Dallas Mavericks owner Mark Cuban.
Oh, right.
Former Dallas Mavericks owner. Joe, you talked about Fox. I do want to build upon what you had to say, because you mentioned the journalists on Fox News. And I would add two other notes to the distinguishing factor. Let me actually add three notes, the distinguishing elements that make Fox nothing like MSNBC. Number one, millions watch Fox. Tens of thousands of watch MSNBC. Fox is a behemoth. MSNBC is a tadpole. Second, in addition to the journalists that you just mentioned, how about Trey Yingst? How about all the men and women in the field, in the Middle East, in the Ukraine, news gathering, Bill Malingin on the border? Fox does actual reporting. Actual journalists in the field. MSNBC has nothing of the kind, Joe. They have nothing of the kind. They lean on the muscle of NBC. So if they are sold off, they are nothing. They are nothing. Honestly, they're nothing, and they're actually less than the Will Cain Show. Because I can bring Trey Yingst on. I can bring Bill Malingin onto the Will Cain Show. They do not have reporting capability. They're less than a digital product than like the Will Cain Show. And finally, opinion, Joe. You rattled off that all those people are opinion, and it's true that Fox, we have opinion. Jesse Waters is opinion. Sean Hannity is opinion. Will Cain is opinion. But I would set those opinions up against anything said by Joy Reid or Rachel Maddow over the last decade, any day of the week. There's a sense of responsibility in sharing your opinion grounded in the truth that is just vastly different. No one on this network perpetuated the Russia collusion hoax, and we're going to have David Harsanyi on in a little bit to talk about the three biggest conspiracies of the left. But the real difference in the conspiracies from the left and the right is that the left's conspiracies are mainstreamed. They're laundered through the likes of MSNBC. So even when you put opinion side by side, it's nothing like what you're getting on MSNBC versus Fox.
Oh boy, you're so right about that. And you know what I think keeps me in line? And look, I always like to prep anyway. You know, what's the old Navy SEAL saying? The more we sweat in training, the less we bleed in war, kind of thing. So whenever I join you on Fox and Friends Weekend, even for like Rachel's cultural breakdown, I have notes for that because I know that there are nefarious forces out there like Media Matters that watch and listen to every single thing we say. And then they'll write a story about it if you get even one fact wrong. And then places like Mediaite pick up stories like that. And then before you know, it's going viral over maybe you just misspoke or maybe you didn't do your homework. So I try, in my opinion, and I used to be a reporter, but I've gone to the opinion side. And quite frankly, it's more fun because I know that if I get it wrong, it's going to be called out in some way, shape, or form, or just by people watching Fox and maybe fans on X, like, hey, Joe, you said this. I think you meant this type of thing. I'm like, oh, all right, good to know. But yeah, their facts, their opinions are not based in any sort of reality whatsoever. And I think that's why you brought up Bill Malingin before, just as an example. And Bill does great work and has much better hair than both of us. That I do know, and that's probably why I'm wearing a hat right now. But Bill is a serious reporter who does excellent work at the border. And I think when Donald Trump won, not just all those swing states, but the popular vote, MSNBC viewers must have been like, what, the border's such a big deal? Like exit polls say that was a number 2 issue. I don't think it's really that bad. And then like, well, if you watch Fox, you probably would know that it is worse than even probably being reported. So yeah, between Malingin, you mentioned Trey Yingst, who does a great job, Benjamin Hall, our friend who, lost his ability to, basically walk. He had young kids at home. You hear these stories. He put himself in harm's way. And then finally, a shout out to our White House correspondents, Peter Ducey, who, a little trivia question. My son in elementary school has the same teacher that Peter had at the same elementary school, which is quite the trivia stat there. And Jackie Heinrich, right? They ask great questions in that press room, and they always go viral because no one else is asking the good questions. And I would hope that the correspondents there finally wake up and be like, okay, maybe I should be asking. Let me look at Gallup and see what the 5 most important issues are to voters. Maybe I should be asking about that more and say climate change, abortion, and January 6th less.
Well, Bill O'Reilly suggested, and this will be our final topic together with Joe Concha. Bill O'Reilly suggested last night, Joe, that the next in line after MSNBC for a market self-correction, or at least a corporate sense of responsibility, would be The View. I've made the case, and I don't say this lightly, Joe, because I am a free speech absolutist, but there are limitations to free speech. One of the limitations that our law recognizes is defamation. Defamation, telling untruths about other people out there in the world, whether or not private or public is a different standard, but telling untruths about them that damages them in some quantifiable way. That would include reputation. What we've seen yesterday was Sonny Hostin forced to go on air mid-show, mid-segment, and issue essentially a correction about the things she was saying about Matt Gaetz. I think The View, CNN, and what we're seeing with MSNBC is in line, Joe, for some serious market correction. Now, that can come in many ways, Joe. That could come in the form of a defamation suit. I think it could come in the form of an attorney general under Donald Trump re-examining public broadcast airwaves that are licensed by CBS, NBC, and ABC that are, as part of their charter, supposed to serve the public interest. And I think you have a very strong case to make they are not serving the public interest. Or it could come simply by some sense of corporate responsibility, the likes of which we may be seeing here now at Comcast. Yeah. What do you think will happen to The View, ABC, CNN, CBS?
Overall, you're going to see a lot of consolidation. You're going to see the layoffs that we're going to see at CNN soon. It's just not a sustainable model because without the ad revenue coming in, well, we all know what happens from there. As far as The View, people don't realize that they are under the ABC News umbrella, not entertainment, which is what it should be under, I guess, if you want to call that entertainment, but news. And at some point, there has to be a comeuppance. I mean, we saw Whoopi Goldberg go after this bakery on Staten Island saying that they won't serve. I don't have the full story. I kind of went by it and you can probably fill in the blanks, but basically won't serve certain people based on religious belief. Is that what happened there? And the guy proved
political.
That he does.
She made the accusation that a bakery on Staten Island is supposedly her favorite, and she wanted to have the View's celebration of her birthday catered by this bakery on Staten Island, denied her service because of her political point of view. As it turns out, and as it's explained by their attorney, their boiler was down, and they didn't feel secure about their ability to fulfill the order. Whoopi took that as an insult to Whoopi, and then took the power and muscle she has. By the way, she's the more powerful figure in this dynamic. She took the airwaves of ABC and absolutely went after this small bakery on Staten Island.
Yeah. And what was the result, right? Again, I go back to X. X then fact checks Whoopi, and X is not a person; it's millions of people. And now the bakery is having its best business it has ever had as a result of Whoopi lying about what happened. So I think that's like the great corrector here is that there are a bunch of Paul Revere's on there, screaming, saying that's wrong, and we're going to hold you to account. And then you get what's called ratioed into oblivion. And then a business like that actually thrives when in the past, without X, it would have been Whoopi's word versus them. And with the media behind Whoopi, probably she would have got away with it. She isn't this time. And hopefully there's a lawsuit coming her way as well as a result. Thanks for filling in the blank on that, by the way.
Well, I think we are going to see, in financial terms, we'd call it a market correction, Joe. In justice terms, we call it accountability. I do have a sense we're about to see a pivot, some accountability for the insanity that has been spouted off from these quote-unquote mainstream sources for far too long. I'm really happy we got to have you on with what? A Browns jersey, Joe Concha? Is that what I'm seeing? Am I seeing the Cleveland Browns?
Correct. It's a Kevin Mack jersey, and I own every NFL jersey home and away. It's my one vice that my wife allows me to have. And then I'll wear the jersey of the team that's playing tonight. And obviously we have the Steelers in Cleveland in a very cold and possibly snowy Brown Stadium. So that's going to be very, very fun to watch.
Joe, you have a home and away for all 32 NFL teams. And I assume if you're wearing Kevin Mack, you don't have necessarily just contemporary jerseys. So you got retro, you got vintage as well. So I have to ask, what are your two jerseys for the Dallas Cowboys?
Oh, I have Bill Bates. The one rule is that it has to be the old school jersey. Yeah, Bill Bates, great safety, very underrated because he wasn't on any Super Bowl teams, I don't think. So that was that. So yeah, Bill Bates, and then my away jersey, which is actually the Navy one, is Roger Staubach. The player has to be older than me, or else I feel a little weird. I can't wear Trevor Lawrence.
That's incredible. I have to give you props on your taste. You picked like a quintessential cowboy on both fronts. One very popular, obviously Captain America, Roger Staubach. The other more of a niche, inside Dallas respect for Bill Bates. Great job. That's just so impressive, Joe Concha.
Bill Bates is cheaper on the Will Concha.
Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, have a good one. Take care.
All right, there he goes, Joe Concha. By the way, over there on YouTube, the folks are talking, and Leftoid says MSNBC and CNN do more spinning than a washing machine. Suzanne, again, my boss, chiming in on the YouTube comments. Suzanne, the blonde, suspicious, my boss, Suzanne, says, I feel like Fox hosts actually like each other too, unlike MSNBC. And then Sean Lombard says, Elon will buy it, turn around, and make tons of money. I don't think Elon's going to be interested in MSNBC. Very popular segment in the past. We haven't dusted it off in a few months. Will's Rabbit Hole. Obviously, I'm not always just tuned in to politics, not exclusively seeking relief in sports. In fact, with the pitiful play of the Dallas Cowboys, I found other ways to spend my leisure time. I've been reading, and when I fall down a rabbit hole, I want to share with you what I've learned. Today, let's talk about race, tribes, Appalachia, hidden tribes within America, including the Malingins. Next on The Will Cain Show. Will's Rabbit Hole inspired by Demon Copperhead. It is The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Terrestrial radio, market to market, across this great United States of America. But if you go over to Spotify or Apple and you hit subscribe, and if you think it's so deserved, give us a 5-star review. You'll help spread the word. Word is spreading. The audience is exploding. You're in the comment section right now on Facebook and on YouTube. We got a poll question up. Who do you trust less, CNN or MSNBC? We'll get to your answers coming up in just a little bit here on the Will Cain Show. We'll talk about that when we sit down with David Harsanyi, the author of a brand new book, Blue Anon, about the 3 biggest conspiracy theories on the left. I've been reading, fellas, a book called Demon Copperhead. It's by an author named Barbara Kingsolver. Now, you know, I've talked to you guys about the power of recommendation from time to time. Like, the way it works is, for me, at least, I got to hear something about 2 or 3 times. Like, and once I hear it, I'd say 2 or 3 times, I start cluing in. Oh, maybe this is pretty good. But Barbara Kingsolver kind of in my head was like, okay, that's going to be chick lit. I'm going to be honest. Like, I have trouble connecting to music or movies or books that are not designed to connect with me. And I don't feel sexist about that. I mean, Taylor Swift doesn't talk to me. She's not trying to talk to me. So why would I connect with Taylor Swift? I was actually in a car yesterday in Alabama with a Fox and Friends producer, and she said, "We'll just try it. Let's just try a little Taylor Swift." So I did.
Which songs?
I did. So there was one called "Cowboy Like Me." It was all right. Yeah, I mean, I didn't hate it. And there was another one she told me was the song that Taylor Swift wrote about Jake Gyllenhaal, like, one of her breakup songs.
Was that the long one?
Yep.
10-minute
I don't
version?
know. I don't know. That's the thing, James. It's not bad. I will tell you, it's not bad, but it's not designed for me.
It's good work.
So, like, if I listen to Zach Bryan or Jason Isbell, and even if I don't share their politics, I know that what they're talking about is sort of designed for me to identify with. And these different artists, I get what you're talking about, man. And that doesn't make me sexist. That just sort of makes me the appropriate consumer, So I had a similar presumption about the book or any book by Barbara Kingsolver. But boy, was I wrong. I was so wrong about Demon Copperhead. So Demon Copperhead is about a boy who grows up in Appalachia, southern western, the furthest western county in Virginia, on the border of northeastern Tennessee. And he grows up in a community and in a family that is just prototypically what we come to think of as Appalachia. I mean, coal mining, poverty, opioids, the whole deal. And he grows up an orphan. He grows up in foster care, and it's about his life navigating this, starting from about the age of 10. And I don't know, because I haven't finished the book, like how old he is by the time the book ends, but it's a lot about high school football. It's really great. And it's incredible the way this woman, who's not middle-aged, she's old, I would suggest, I don't know how old she is, but she looks on the book jacket cover like 60-ish, 65. It's incredible, boys. She has captured like the voice of a redneck young man. I can't even tell you how, like, that's what, Dan, I don't know if you read fiction, but because I know you love music, you should read this book for no other reason than to hear the voice of this kid. And then you're all constantly reminding yourself, it's written by an old woman. I mean, it is phenomenal writing, Demon Copperhead. But, by the way, in the course of this book, I learned, as a quasi-side rabbit hole, the origins, which I never knew, of the term redneck. Does anybody know where that comes from? Do you know why certain people are called rednecks?
You got the sunburn?
Sunburn on your neck, working outside?
Certain minds.
That's what I thought. That's what I thought as well. The back of your neck being sunburned from being bent over working manual labor in the sun. No.
Huh.
It originates, at least I learned this in this book, and it is fiction, but it's grounded in like, local history of the region, that the coal mines and towns of Appalachia were largely owned by the business. And anyone that lived or worked in that town not only worked for the coal mine, but they shopped at grocery stores owned by the coal mine. Everything they bought was by the mines. And at some point, I believe it was in the early 1900s, the coal miners go on strike against the coal mine. Well, the mining companies then bring in Union soldiers, like American soldiers, to quell this rebellion, to quell this strike. And the miners took to the mountains and took to the hills and fought back against the militiaed soldiers in Appalachia. And they identified themselves, the fellow miners, the local militia, by wearing red scarves around their neck.
Wow.
And so they became known as Rednecks as they fought. Well, I forget the name of the war, but it's like in American history, it's one of these wars that is real, localized, but a significant story in the story of America. But I'm reading this book, okay, and the main character is a boy named Demon Copperhead. Demon is a nickname. His name is Damon, and I can't remember how he got the name Copperhead, but it's not his Christian last name. But part of it is because of the way he looks. He's got like shock red hair, real bright, like green eyes, and dark skin, like tan. It's described almost as like he's tan. But through the book, they keep throwing this term around, and he says, I'm a Malingin. And it's a capitalized M. And throughout the book, they talk a lot here and there about Malingins. And enough that she never really does a historical lesson on what is a Malingin. And I'm like, I got to know what this is. So, as is the mark of any good piece of content that I consume, I fall down the rabbit hole. I'm on Wikipedia. Now I'm on Google. Now I'm reading about this or that.
Now.
So, interesting, right?
Yeah.
Like, curiosity piqued. What's a Malingin? Wow. So, Malingins are sort of a subset of ethnic people particular to this region of the country, northeastern Tennessee, western Virginia. But their origins are somewhat mysterious. So the popular conception is they are triracial. They are black, white, and Native American, Indian. And in the book, they talk about that a little bit. Do you have Cherokee in you? You know, what it may be. But I've read now, most DNA tests suggest, and it's really, really hard to trace because we're talking about a population of people that sort of popped up out of nowhere in the 1700s. And it's hard to identify. There's common last names, some common last names, but like who's a Malingin, who's not a Malingin. And so it's like, who do you do DNA tests on? But DNA tests, like 23andMe, don't show a ton of Native American, that they have sub-Saharan African and, Western European DNA. So what it most likely is mixed race breeding and marriages dating back to the 1700s at a time when, by the way, obviously that would have been incredibly controversial. And yes, laws dating up until the early 1900s in Virginia that banned miscegenation, banned mixed race. So what happened is it's almost like this new category of people was identified, in part, we should say, to avoid racial discrimination, to avoid segregation. No, I'm not subject to this law or that law. I'm a Malingin. I'm not black, right? But what I found equally fascinating is, first, there are suggestions that we've had already before Obama the first black president or the first president who is Malingin. Could you guess who that might be?
Clinton? Not looks-wise, but they all said Clinton was the first black president.
And this president, you wouldn't identify with that geographical region. But his family did come from somewhere near this region of the country. He would have represented a separate state when he ran for president. What do you got, tinfoil?
Was it Jefferson?
No. So you got to go between Clinton, Jefferson, timeline-wise.
That's a pretty big one.
Chronologically.
All right. So from Virginia? Western part of the Virginia?
Okay, let me give you a few more hints. How about, here are a few characteristics people talk about with Malingin. Yes, darker complected skin, high cheekbones. I'll give you this. His mother was from Virginia.
Big top
He
hats.
represented the state of Illinois. He represented Illinois.
Lincoln.
What?
Wow.
There's some suggestions online that Lincoln was Malingin.
Yeah, he was.
But secondarily, here's the secondary curiosity for me that this piqued. There are people all across this country that are micro sub small group ethnicities, racial groups / tribes that are fascinating. So there's a group called the Dixons in Florida, in the Panhandle. Same thing. Are they part Cherokee? Are they part Indian? Are they mixed black-white? There is in southwestern Louisiana a larger geographic region, a group of people called Redbone. In North Carolina, there was a group, still is, called Croats, and then it seems like an extension of this called the Lumbees. Okay, now this one, and they think maybe even Malingins as well, are connected to something that we talked about in a previous rabbit hole here. Jamestown is the first American colony to take, but it's not the first American colony. The lost colony of Roanoke is the first failed attempt at establishing a Western European colony on this continent.
That's our background.
But they disappeared. The lost colony of Roanoke disappeared, and no one knows what happened to them. Did they starve? Were they slaughtered by Indians? Or there is a suggestion, and Patrick, I think you remember we talked about this, Virginia Dare is the first Western European woman born on America. She was a baby, born here.
Right.
And, Dare, V-Dare, is still a thing on the far right in many places, but it's not just a far right thing. It's like historical. She's the first, essentially, white woman born on America. She was part of the lost colony of Roanoke. And so the third theory is they disappeared into the Indian tribes, and they intermarried, and they became a new group of people that they think are connected to Croats or became Lumbees. But then finally, the group that has previously captured my attention and sent me down a rabbit hole that I didn't do on the show is the Ramapo of northern New Jersey. And I don't know if you Northeasterners are aware of that, but you got the Ramapo Mountains, right? I remember watching a movie called Out of the Furnace with Christian Bale.
Love that movie.
It's a really good movie.
So good.
Okay, do you remember they go to those fights and Woody Harrelson plays a Ramapo, right?
Yeah.
And so 2 days, that sent me down the rabbit hole. Who are the Ramapo?
Yep.
Well, it's very similar to the Malingins. Are they American Indian? Because the Ramapo are a state of New Jersey recognized tribe, but I don't think they're a federally recognized tribe. They claim Indian heritage, but there's a working theory that they are what's called the Jackson Whites of New York, which were free blacks who served, I think, who fought with the British maybe? I'm not positive on that. And then they kind of fled or moved out to the mountains of New Jersey. And here's what's fascinating. So finally, here are my big three. I wanted to share with you guys my three takeaways of this being more than just a simply, hey, did you know about Malingins? So first, it is one, you guys know I'm attracted to this, but the lesson in hyperlocalism that is the incredible true sense of the word diversity of America. Like each one of these tribes I described for you, they're actually like one or two counties in each of those states. Like, the Dixons in Florida, one or two counties. The Malingins, one or two counties. The Ramapo, one or two, really small. And you don't know about it unless you're from those areas. I'll give you another, for example. There's the Turks in South Carolina. And people thought, are they the same thing? Are they claiming to be sort of Turkish in order to escape? No, they've done DNA tests. They're actually descendants of like a small group of Turks who moved to the United States in the 1700s, and they've remained insular and with each other in a couple of counties in South Carolina. And how would you know about this if you weren't from this area of the country? So I just think in a world that reduces everything to black and white, meaning literally you're black, you're white, maybe you're Latino, it's such a rich sense of real diversity that you only get to see through the microscope of hyperlocalism. Second, I think you do have to acknowledge that all of these groups are connected into America's racial past and history. Like they are attempting to escape in some ways the black and white, right? They are attempting to, attempting to qualify themselves as something separate from those two ways that we created laws for much of our history. And then third, the deep history, because everything I'm explaining to you dates back to the 16 and 1700s. I come from Texas. Our history is 200 years old. It's 200 years old. It's not 400 years old here. And when you have a scope of history that long, it's just really fascinating. And of course, my family probably comes from Tennessee or Alabama, and my wife's family comes from Kentucky, and before that, Virginia. So we all have our deeper connections. But when you live in a place with that deeper, longer sense of history, set aside Europe, how interesting it is that you can develop these little pockets of color, of richness that I think just makes this whole thing so special, America. And by the way, I cannot recommend it enough. Demon Copperhead. You should read Demon Copperhead. 2 days, you got something you want to tell me? Matt Gaetz
Major
has just tweeted out I had excellent meetings with senators yesterday. I appreciate their thoughtful feedback and the incredible support of so many. While the momentum was strong, it is clear that my confirmation was unfairly becoming a distraction to the critical work of Trump Vance. Wow. Matt Gaetz, I assume with this suggesting he is declining his nominee as Attorney General.
Yep. Big news.
Breaking news. Breaking news here on the Will Cain Show. Boy, that is something to really think about. I believe I have this correct. The last time the Senate declined to confirm a nominee to a cabinet position for a president was 1989. We are not seeing that here with Matt Gaetz, but he's saying that the writing was on the wall, so he will move to pulling his nomination as Attorney General. That is breaking news, and that is worthy of deeper analysis. Perhaps we'll get into that, plus the three biggest conspiracies of the left with the author of a brand new book, Blue Anon, David Harsanyi, next on The Will Cain Show. Matt Gaetz declines now his nomination to Attorney General of the United States. It's The Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel and the Fox News Facebook page. Hit subscribe at Apple, Spotify, or right here on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube or on Facebook, you're getting this breaking news as we speak. We invite you into the conversation. I think this is fascinating. It is, I don't want to call it wholly unexpected or a shock, but it's still, I think, a surprise. As I mentioned, no cabinet nominee had been declined by the Senate since 1989. I believe that was George H.W. Bush's nominee for Secretary of Defense, who had his own controversies, but also there were questions about his party loyalty, like who he had been aligned with in the past. Was he a true Republican? And he did not get the support of the Senate. Now, whether or not Matt Gaetz would have got support of the Senate, I think I would have thought came down to the will of Donald Trump. It would take quite a senator to right now thwart the will of Donald Trump. Donald Trump overwhelmingly winning for president of the United States, well over 300 electoral votes, a clear mandate. And I think marching forward, real power to define the future of the Republican Party. And if he said, I want Matt Gaetz, I think it would have taken some real act of defiance from a United States senator. So it does suggest that Donald Trump perhaps was ready as well to move on from Matt Gaetz. He's officially now no longer a congressman as well. I think there are definitely chess pieces in play here. Hard to process. What does that mean for other cabinet appointees? What does that mean for Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for Tulsi Gabbard, for Pete Hegseth? I don't know. And I think it's something I got to sit back and think about, but I can also help process it with you here. Drop into the comments section and let me know what you think here on The Will Cain Show. We can also talk about this with David Harsanyi. David Harsanyi is the author of a new book, The Rise of Blue Anon, How Democrats Became the Party of Conspiracy Theorists. I want to get into this book. David has laid out for us today the three biggest conspiracies forwarded, championed, disseminated by the left. But David, first, I want to get your reaction to the news, the breaking news about Matt Gaetz.
Well, I assume he went to the Senate and enough of them said they weren't going to, support him. You only need 4 or 5 to do so. Obviously, you have some senators who aren't, who are pretty moderate, and a few others who aren't as loyal to Donald Trump as one might expect. So that's how I view it. I think that there was just, if there's no path forward, he was probably either asked or saw the writing on the wall and stepped aside.
Let me ask you some chess-based questions, David. Do you think that this is a shock? Is it a surprise? There are those who suggested this was the fate of this appointment from the beginning, that there was a great anticipation that Matt Gaetz was never going to get confirmed. He's already, as you mentioned, very unpopular within some circles of Republicans. Do you think this is chess in some way being played by Donald Trump, or that he had a real interest in making sure that Matt Gaetz was Attorney General?
I have no inside information, but it seemed to me he was serious about it. I don't think Donald Trump really, I think he's pretty straightforward. I don't think he plays the 3D chess like his fans often believe. I think he's straightforward. I think he wanted him. I think from what I read, he was convinced by Gaetz himself. kind of like the last person in the room. And frankly, he moved forward without even vetting him. Typically with cabinet positions, you kind of feel out the Senate, you see who they like, who they don't like. But maybe Donald Trump was testing their loyalty in a way. I don't know. That could be true, but he wasn't really vetted. Honestly, he is a big name sort of online, but he's a backbencher, really. He hasn't done that much. I'm not sure what qualifications he had, or maybe people just felt he wasn't the right guy. So it is surprising that it happened, because usually you get your way when you're president. But considering who we're talking about, I'm not sure it's that crazy to believe that that he would need to step aside. The ethics thing, it's a complicated situation.
Well, so I would not push back, but forward the conversation with this. I think that I probably disagree with whether or not Matt Gaetz was vetted, at least when it came to his personal record. Like, nothing is a surprise. Matt Gaetz has been drug across headlines in the media for the better part of a couple of years. So no scandal caught Trump by surprise when it comes to Matt Gaetz. Now, whether or not Donald Trump vetted Matt Gaetz in terms of pushback or popularity within the Senate might be a separate question. But I think that goes back again to Trump believing that, hey, don't go against Donald Trump. As for qualifications, David, I don't know. Gaetz is incredibly smart. I mean, that is undeniable. Like, he's just a smart guy. He intellectually knows the law, is well educated, and articulates conservative points of view in a way that I think actually very few can, even while caging it in constitutionalism or in the legal framework. Gaetz' style, I think, in the end, is his undoing, more so than ethics or a lack of qualifications. He just made a lot of guys mad. He just always made guys on the right mad. He was willing to go that way. I mean, Kevin McCarthy hates the guy, right? And I don't know who else, but Kevin McCarthy's got a lot of friends, and a lot of those types of Republicans hated Gaetz. My suspicion is, in the end, that's why they weren't going to vote for him. They hate Matt Gaetz.
I mean, it's completely part of it. I mean, you have to build goodwill with people in power to, get power. And I mean, listen, he took down the Speaker of the House for personal reasons. It was pretty clear that they had a problem with each other. And there was no plan to see who was going to be the next speaker. He just did that. I think that rubbed people the wrong way. I don't argue that he has a high IQ, but let me just be a devil's advocate for a minute and say he's the type of guy, I think at least, that I would be nervous that he would be more loyal to the president than he would be to the Constitution. I know I have no particular thing that I can point to say that that's true, but he is known because he is a Trump loyalist. I mean, that's why he's known. That's why he was probably picked by Donald Trump, which is completely his prerogative to do. But it's also, the Senate is an independent institution that needs to protect itself as well and do its job. So, I don't know. I think there are better people to do that job. If you really want to fix the Justice Department, I don't mean qualifications like, oh boy, you ran some institution. I mean qualifications like he's shown the ability to destroy something and then fix it. You can't just destroy the Justice Department. It needs to be fixed. It is going to exist. It's not going anywhere, no matter what people think. So anyway, I don't know. Those are just my immediate thoughts. Do
you have any thoughts, David, on who might be a new appointee for Attorney General?
I haven't thought about it. I'm not sure. It'll probably be a wild card. It's going to be hard actually for the Senate to come back again and say no to the second pick, right? So he can maybe pick whoever he feels like right now without much pushback.
Oh, I should be careful. My phone's ringing right now. This could be it. This could be the call. I mean, I don't know why you'd leave me out of the Fox and Friends weekend appointments to the cabinet. Here's the one I'm suited to, Attorney General. Meanwhile,
Nice.
real Donald Trump has tweeted or put on Truth Social, I greatly appreciate the recent effort of Matt Gaetz in seeking approval to be Attorney General. He was doing very well, but at the same time did not want to be a distraction for the administration, for which he has much respect. Matt has a wonderful future, and I look forward to watching all of the great things he will do. Last question on this note, David. What do you think this means for his other appointees? Is this a crack in the wall? Does this show a bit of weakness that senators will now think they can flex their muscle on their opinions on Pete Hegseth or Tulsi Gabbard or Robert F. Kennedy Jr.? Or do you think this is sort of like, you're getting one, but you're not taking down my cabinet from Donald Trump?
I again, just from my point of view, I mean, like someone like Tulsi, obviously, a lot of the senators are not going to like her history and stuff, but I don't know that there's anything there to say you can't have this cabinet member. She served, she's just as qualified as a lot of people that other, historically the norm is that you let them go. I think that about most of his people, not RFK Jr. I'm kind of alone on this lately, but I think he's a terrible pick. He is a conspiracy theorist. His disposition is not for this job. I think a lot of senators probably, I think if he has a confirmation hearing, he's going to have to answer a lot of questions about all the crazy stuff he said. That's going to be a tough spot, I think, for him. But we'll see. I could be wrong about that.
I hope you're wrong. I disagree with you about Robert F. Kennedy Jr. I don't intend to have a debate on RFK here now today in the time we have together. By the way, David is the writer at the Washington Examiner. He does focus on, for example, his accusation of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. being a conspiracy theorist. Don't let that undercut, by the way, what he's about to tell us. The three biggest conspiracies of the left, although Robert F. Kennedy Jr., for much of his career, a man of the left. But you got a new book out called The Rise of Blue Anon. How the Democrats became a party of conspiracy theorists. I should start at the front, David. I have sort of a mixed feeling the minute that the idea of conspiracy theory is even invoked, because the right has been the victim of so much dismissal on the ground of conspiracy theory. And many of those conspiracy theories, notably around COVID and others, have turned out to be true. But, I think actually your back book jacket does a good job of laying the groundwork of why the left is the primary province of conspiracy. And I'm just going to read you a few quotes that you have on the back of the book, Blue Anon. You have, "Now it's a vast Russian conspiracy." Hillary Clinton. Quote, "The more we learn about the 2016 election, the more illegitimate it becomes. America deserves to know whether we have a fake president in the Oval Office." House Democratic Caucus Leader Hakeem Jeffries. And then finally, "And folks, look, the survival of our planet is on the ballot." And that sounds like hyperbole, but it genuinely is. Joe Biden, 46th president of the United States, talking about the survival of our planet. David, why do you think the left became the party of conspiracy theorists?
Well, two things, just to talk about what you just said. There's a lot of gaslighting that goes on with the term conspiracy theory, going all the way back to Hillary in 1998, going on the Today Show and saying there's a vast right-wing conspiracy against her husband, there, with all the stuff that was true about Monica Lewinsky. So they gaslight that way, and obviously we should have an open mind to all kinds of ideas, but once they're debunked, you got to move on. Why do I think the left is I put it this way, no one is immune from conspiracy theories and paranoia in politics. It's been that way since ancient history. The difference is that the left will take conspiracy theories, let's say Russia collusion hoax. They'll launder it through media. They'll calibrate it for maximum plausibility. They will bring in so-called experts who will give it credibility, people we used to believe and trust in the past. They will disseminate it through institutions of government, of higher education, of all of that. So when you have all of that against you, it's incredibly difficult to debunk it. People think that the bigger and crazier a conspiracy theory is, the easier it is to debunk. It's not true, because the bigger it is, the more, whenever you debunk something, they're like, oh, that's exactly what a person would say, and then they build on it and build on it. So that's what happened to the Russia collusion hoax. It is the most successful conspiracy theory of all time. Donald Trump could not even govern for 3.5 years, at least, of his presidency, because it was enveloped by this thing. And everyone on the left was basically a part of it. So I think that's the difference. More effective. It's not like
I think that's a huge,
on social media.
Difference.
Yeah. What's that?
Yeah, it's not randos on Facebook. That's the huge difference. It's not randos on Facebook. It's not marginalized voices. It's the most powerful voices in media that are actually the ones that push these conspiracies. And we're going to go through the three biggest here that have been pushed from the highest of mountaintops from the left. But again, I have this mixed feeling like conspiracy, it's such a cudgel. It's been designed to stamp down, dissenting voices. But at the same time, I love this joke. Two conspiracy theorists die and go to heaven. Have you heard this, David? They die and go to heaven. They're standing at the gates of St. Peter. And he says, before you guys enter, I'm going to grant you one question. Anything you want to know. I'll be upfront, honest, all-knowing, all-seeing. You get the truth. What do you want to ask me? And these two conspiracy theorists look at each other and go, okay, this is it. This is it. Let's do it. Okay. Who killed JFK. And St. Peter looks at him and goes, Lee Harvey Oswald from the School Book Depository. And they look at each other and they go, this thing is bigger than we thought. You know, it goes all the way to heaven. There's no end to satisfying a conspiracy theorist questions or answers.
That's great. Yeah, exactly right. Exactly right.
All right, let's go through what you think are the three biggest conspiracies spread by the left. First, number one, what do you think is the biggest conspiracy spread by the left?
Well, I just want to quickly say, when I say conspiracy, and you're right about conspiracy theories, I also am talking about paranoia. Paranoia that drives your political ideals, right? So one of the worst, the most pernicious, I think, is paranoia about race. Everything has become identitarian recently, but more than that, convincing people, a large group of people, Black Americans, I think 67% of them believe that there's a systematic effort to try to stop them from voting, for instance. Now, it is easier to vote today than it ever has been. They will mail you a ballot in Korean, in any language you want. All you have to do is mail it back. It's never been this easy to vote. In no place is it as easy to vote. But not just that, the idea that police are hunting Black men. I'm not saying there's never a cop who's terrible or racist. I'm saying that there's no systemic effort to kill young Black men. The BLM movement was driven by a bunch of incidents. Some were racially motivated, but most of the big ones were not. Michael Brown, these are I wouldn't call them conspiracy theories. They're fake news, right? And they drove a whole movement that was adopted by giant corporations that Republicans were participating in. So that I think is one of the worst.
Yeah, I agree. To the point of voter suppression, like that's okay. Let's give an example of each of what you're talking about. On the point of voter suppression, the best example is the new voter integrity law in Georgia, right? Passed by Governor Brian Kemp. It was described by Joe Biden as Jim Crow 2.0. The Major League Baseball pulled their All-Star game because of this law in Georgia. I believe Coca-Cola and Delta originally suggested they were going to withhold business from the state of Georgia, or at least they wrote letters protesting it. I know for a fact that in 2020, I think it was 2.7 million people voted in Georgia. In 2024, the number's well over 3 million people. So more people voted. It's easy to vote. No one is trying to suppress the vote. And then I actually think it is a conspiracy, Dave, on the police hunting down Black men. You take isolated incidences that are unrelated. You draw an overarching narrative among them when they're disconnected, other than, two random isolated instances in the skin colors involved. And sometimes not even that. Like Ma'Khia Bryant, was that a white officer? Might have been. Some of these are Black officers as well, right? So,
yeah.
And you make everybody believe something that is not true. And yeah, it's fake news, but also I do think that's a conspiracy. You write in the book about this, which I think is pretty interesting. You write about the Democrats of the past were the champion of marginalized groups and minorities, and by proxy then victims, but they've run out of victims. So they have to continue to invent new things, new traumas, new classes, new incidences of victimization.
That's exactly right. Typically, conspiracy theories are believed by people who feel powerless, who feel like they're victims. They believe shadowy forces are, have a concerted effort to steal from them or whatever it is. So what happens when you run every institution? What happens when you're running the government? Well, you have to create new classes of victims, like you just mentioned. So they do that with women. They do that with, all kinds of minorities. I don't think it's working anymore. I think this election showed that maybe the fever is broken on that. We'll see. But, so this is how can I say it? It's like a holistic effort to scare people, basically. Minorities, everything from little kids in elementary school who are given, or high school who are given like 1619 project books or whatever. It starts young and it just continues through. So it's not one conspiracy. It's this current of paranoia. Yeah.
And you wrote about this in the book too. That's this victimization pursuit is sort of this Handmaid's Tale vision as well of America that one's right now. That's the movie they're running. That's the conspiracy they're running right now. I think women have showed up in that costume to vote.
Yeah, I mean, if you show, if you show up in that costume, something is wrong with you. Like, you don't understand context of history. You don't understand anything. Women today in America are freer and safer than women have been anywhere in the world ever. The idea that because some people are pro-life, that you have no freedoms, that you're going to be in a Christian theocracy, which is another kind of strand of paranoia, is insane. I mean, I talk about this in the book, but there are cynical people who spread conspiracy theories. Morning Joe, for instance, will tell you that journalists are going to be shot and round up. And then there are credulous people who believe that stuff. Yeah. So the credulous people are the ones who dress up in the nun outfit and show up to vote. The cynical people just move on to meet with Donald Trump, after the election. And
yes,
the credulous people might pick up a gun and try to shoot Donald Trump, right? They believe that they've been stripped of their agency, that fascism is coming or whatever. Obviously, I don't want to chill speech. You should say whatever you want, but it is what it is, right?
So second biggest conspiracy theory that you've offered us here today is election denialism. And I want to start with this one because anyone watching, and I know we often do have people from the left or not on the right who watch the Will Cain Show. I see you in the comments section. By the way, you should just take a note and just share it with our audience. I see your comments coming in, like Ted Smith, who has suggested Will Cain for Attorney General. Thank you, Ted. We'll see if the call comes in. And Sean Flanagan, same thing, Will Cain for Attorney General. So we'll see. We'll see. Otherwise, I'll be back here next week hosting the Will Cain Show.
I'd rather have you as head of
anyone
Doge.
on the left is
head of Doge. D-O-G.
Head is. I think that job is taken. I think that's Elon and Vivek. All that's left is the 80-hour a week for minimum pay jobs, and I don't want that one at Doge. Right. So anyone watching from the left, Dave's gonna be like, "What did you guys do in 2020? Election denialism." Da da da. You point out the long history of the left denying the legitimacy of elections.
Yeah, I mean, think about 2000. Now, I'm an older dude. I remember 2000, and I remember that every major Democrat said it had been stolen, that something had happened in Florida, and that the Supreme Court had stepped in and stolen it from Al Gore. But of course, there were independent recounts of Florida. In fact, in most of them, the vote total expanded for George W. Bush, not contracted, and he won that election. 2004 came along, and everyone forgets this. Every major Democrat, I'm not joking, I laid out in the book, claimed that something had happened in Ohio that needed investigating, that there had been illegitimacy. They undermined the veracity of the election. A bunch of Democrats tried to stop the votes from being, the election, going through the House. And then 2016, the next time they lost, no Democrat, every single Democrat was on the record with this insane theory that the president had illegally won or that the election wasn't real because he was a Russian asset. The New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, all these major institutions, they will all entertain any conspiracy theory you have about Republicans winning. I'll give you a quick example. Last year in the New York Times, there was like an 8,000-word story from this dude who's like 80-something years old, who was around in Texas in the 80s, who says that Ronald Reagan stole the 1980 election because he had made a secret deal with Iran so for them to hold the hostages until, after the election. Now, first of all, Ronald Reagan won for many, many other reasons. It was a massive landslide, but that's a nutty conspiracy. There was no evidence, nothing to back this up, but they will entertain it like some crazy conspiracy theory site. There's no journalistic integrity in something like that, but they will do it. So anyway, election denialism.
And you go back to the 80s. You go back to the 80s, Dave. I don't know, because I didn't get into this chapter of the book, which I intend to, Blue Anon, the rise of Blue Anon. But we've done it on the news. Like, okay, 2000. I believe in 2004 that John Kerry or his surrogates did question the legitimacy of that election. Sure. They didn't in 2008, but they did with Stacey Abrams in Georgia recently. And sure. I would imagine there's many, many other examples. Just rhetorically, like this is like, I don't know that any Republican leader, even Donald Trump, I'm just trying to do a mental catalog of Donald Trump's rhetoric. But any leader or mainstream media personality would go so far to say, America needs to know, deserves to know whether we have a fake president in the Oval Office. That's Hakeem Jeffries talking about Donald Trump in 2016.
I mean, even when they lose, let's say, a governorship, they'll lose whatever. They'll talk about gerrymandering even though they are the biggest purveyors. I mean, they have been gerrymandering forever. Or they'll talk about suppression of the vote. There's always some reason why they delegitimize a victory on the right. They are no more inclined to believe elections than anyone on the left. The left and right are equally unable to deal with this. Though I would say I think actually the left is worse. But whatever. I mean, I'm just saying no one's immune. But again, the New York Times runs that piece. No, conservatives aren't going back to, and talking about other elections being stolen retroactively in revisionist histories. So this is just more paranoia.
Yeah. Again, this difference is that it's laundered from the highest of mountaintops when it comes to the conspiracies on the left. Okay, and then third, we asked Dave to give us his three biggest. He covers many, many more, by the way, in the rise of Blue Anon. But I asked him, give me your three biggest conspiracies perpetuated by the left, laundered and filtered through the mainstream media. And you did not hesitate, Dave, when it came to number one. Your biggest conspiracy perpetuated by the left, Russian collusion.
Yeah, I think Russia collusion hoax invented in an Oppo file, laundered again through the media and by every institution. We had congressional investigations. We had all of that. We went through all that, and it was the most effective there was. But here's the thing. There was no reckoning for it. Adam Schiff has a better job today than he did then when he was lying about this. Journalists, no one lost their job. Maybe in the beginning, one or two, but no one afterwards. They all have better jobs. Then they went on and hid. They gaslit, like you were mentioning, how they do this, Joe Biden's presidency. Anyone who pointed out that he was acuity had failed him and that he couldn't, physically do it anymore were called conspiracy theorists. They hid it. And then on a dime, they just turned around and pushed the guy out and put someone else in. This is an activist media in that way. And they use conspiracy theory, disinformation, misinformation to chill speech and to gaslight you when they themselves are engaged in spreading it and, doing their best to make you believe it. Same thing they're doing now with Tulsi. I saw someone said she's probably a Russian asset. I mean, I don't know that they can kick the habit just because they lost this election.
No, we talked about that yesterday with comedian Dave Smith on the show. And he's like, it's such a malicious logical fallacy. Oh, you have some opinions that overlap with opinions of perhaps Vladimir Putin. That makes you a Russian asset. Like the leap there is gigantic, and it's defamatory in my mind. And it needs some accountability. From the Steele dossier to the computers that were set up to, by Mark Elias and all these others through professors to analyze the election to create, it truly is a conspiracy. And by the way, the Russia collusion hoax is not even a conspiracy. It's been completely unwound and certainly hasn't been laundered or revisited through the mainstream media. It is one of the biggest, 4-5 year conspiracies screamed from the mountaintops of mainstream media that I don't know. Before we go, I don't know where we are, Dave. Like, does the public believe it? I don't know what polling is on public believing that Donald Trump is a Russian asset placed into the presidency by Vladimir Putin.
I think they stopped polling it. They did the same thing with 9/11 truthers. In 2006, there was a poll which showed 50% of Democrats thought George Bush knew about 9/11. Then in 2018, there was a poll that said not that Russians had dropped some Facebook ads, but that they had literally gotten into the machines and changed vote totals. That's what they believed. That's what the question was. And then they stopped polling it. I don't think anyone polls it anymore. I think, because it was a much more convincing victory this time, it's a little more difficult to get all conspiratorial, but I'm not sure it's over. Everyone thinks, it's done and they won't do it anymore. I don't know. I expect something to happen. I mean, it's their nature.
I get my hair cut on the Upper West Side of New York, Dave. I sat in the barber's chair just a week ago, and obviously the primary clientele on the Upper West Side is the left. And I asked him how it's going. Like, how's everybody feeling? He said it's mass depression. And then he began to tell me about, and I've forgotten them, but the conspiracies of why Donald Trump won. It has to do with Elon Musk, and Joe Rogan, and what did Elon Musk do to ensure that Donald Trump won. But don't put it past them. They didn't just see the results of this and go, dang, we got blown out. Maybe we should readjust our game plan. No, there's some conspiracies floating up there about 2024 as well. There's so much laid out here. It's really smart. Dave's a really smart guy. I've known Dave for a long time. Our paths crossed various places like National Review. And he's written a great book here about the rise of Blue Anon, how Democrats became the party of conspiracy theorists. It's out now. And by the way, he's got a quote on the front, a great, great writer, Rush Limbaugh, quote about David Harsanyi. So there you go, right there, the rise of Blue Anon. Go pick it up wherever you get your books. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today on the Will Cain Show.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Okay, we'll talk soon, I hope. There he goes, Dave Harsanyi. Now, I did just get a text from my son saying, are you going to be Attorney General? No indication as of yet. I will tell you, everyone needs to understand. I'm going squirrel hunting this weekend. It's my annual squirrel hunt and catfish rodeo. I will not be in Washington, D.C. or on the couch at Fox and Friends. So, unless your Attorney General is somewhere noodling a catfish off a trot line in East Texas, it ain't me. I'll see you next time on The Will Cain Show.